The police could not find any reason or evidence to deny it. Greg Wang even used a lie detector to re-interrogate Chase-Chin. During most of his confession, the lie detector showed normal results. There were occasional fluctuations, but after all, a machine is just a machine. Even if one tells the truth, if the person is nervous while speaking, the lie detector might show incorrect results. Conversely, if one lies with confidence, truly believing in their own lies, the lie detector might determine that you are not lying. Various investigation results and Chase-Chin's confession all supported the fact that he committed the crime alone. Including Greg Wang, everyone accepted the fact that Chase-Chin had no accomplices. More than 10 days passed, and the investigation of this shocking case was essentially concluded. Chase-Chin was very cooperative, and with the significant manpower and resources the police put into this case, the investigation efficiency was extremely high. The motive, process of the crime, and all physical evidence investigations regarding Chase-Chin were clear, and of course, regarding the capture of Chase-Chin, except for the insiders of the county bureau who knew that Chase-Chin had surrendered himself, other leaders at all levels thought that Chase-Chin was caught during his escape when a plainclothes officer spotted him on the run in the mountains. The case files were already half a foot tall, just waiting for the opinions of the leaders of the higher-level public security, procuratorate, and court, preparing to transfer the case from the public security to the procuratorate. That day, George Xu found Greg Wang. "I'll be heading back tomorrow." "So soon?" "Yes, the case is all wrapped up, it's time to go back. Plus, it's almost New Year in half a month, and there are many things waiting for me to deal with in my department." Greg Wang nodded. "All right, then I'll visit your house during the new year." George Xu smiled. "Good. By the way, what about Chase-Chin? We can't keep him in our county bureau forever, can we?" "Right, I was about to talk to you about this. I've discussed the situation with the leaders in the province, including the fact that Chase-Chin probably only has half a year to live. The leaders are also anxious about this. Nobody wants him to die in prison before the trial. If it gets out, such an abnormal death, especially for a suspect in such a big case, it would be hard to explain." The leadership of the provincial political and legal committee suggested that the trial should start immediately after the new year. A trial right after the new year? Yes. Quick decision, quick trial, immediate death sentence, and quickly downplay the whole incident, turning over this page. Otherwise, the longer it drags on, the more problems may arise, especially since the cause of this case is too sensitive. If it gets out, the impact would be extremely bad. Fortunately, this is a small county town. Your handling of the case has been quite secretive. The common people know that Vincent Fan and a few other families were killed, but they don't know who did it, let alone that it was done by Jasmine Gon's old classmates seeking revenge. The province will report the situation to the Supreme Court, explaining Chase-Chin's special physical condition. Once the trial is over, the province will immediately report to the Supreme Court for a quick review of the death penalty and immediate execution. Greg Wang nodded. This was expected. He then asked, "When will other departments come to take over Chase-Chin?" "Well, that's not decided yet. The initial plan from the higher-ups is that the case of Chase-Chin will still be prosecuted by your county procuratorate and judged by the county court. Of course, it will be a closed trial." "Our county is handling such a big case?" "It's not that your county is handling it alone, but it will be conducted in your county. How to prosecute and judge will be guided by the higher-ups. Considering the extremely negative impact of this case from all aspects, if it were moved to the city, it might attract more attention. So, the trial will be held in your county, on a holiday, secretly tried and executed, and that's it. Once I get back to Hangzhou, I'll give you a precise call in a day or two." Greg Wang sighed. "Well, that's the only way." George Xu smiled. "The case is over, you should also relax a bit." Although Zhen Honbao was still killed in the end, the provincial leaders are very appreciative of your handling of this case, especially your early secrecy work, which was very well done. Not even the media reported on this case. "I believe there won't be a problem with your transfer next year. I'll go back and make some moves for you." By the way, the province will award 100,000 yuan for solving the case, and I heard there's 500,000 from the city, and your county will certainly have a good amount too. This time, you and your brothers can have a good new year. Greg Wang smiled. Everyone has indeed been quite hardworking these past few months. Fortunately, the case was solved before the new year, otherwise, it would have been difficult to celebrate. George Zhu patted his shoulder. What, Chastin is being tried in our county? Xander Su asked a man in his 50s or 60s. He was the chief prosecutor of the county procuratorate and Xander Su's future father-in-law. The chief prosecutor nodded. Yes, the province just issued the directive this morning. Am I in charge of this case? The chief prosecutor did not answer directly, glanced at Xander Su a few times, stood up, walked over to pour a glass of water for him, asked him to sit down, and slowly said, I heard from Chief Wang of the Public Security Bureau that you and Chastin were childhood friends? That's right, we grew up studying together, and we were very close back then. My parents and his parents were also acquaintances. The chief prosecutor seemed thoughtful and after a moment, said, Normally, such a big case would be yours to handle, but considering your relationship, I think it's better to switch to someone else. How can this be? Xander Su expressed his dissatisfaction. Didn't he almost kill you? What, are you still considering your friendship? The chief prosecutor was still apprehensive when talking about this, imagining if Xander Su hadn't quit smoking cigars in the past few years, the man sitting in front of him would have been dead by now. No, it was a misunderstanding on his part, I don't blame him. The chief prosecutor frowned. Regardless of whether it was a misunderstanding towards you, just thinking about it now makes me worried for you. The trial is set for the first Saturday after the new year. To minimize the impact as much as possible, this trial will not be publicly announced. It will be a closed trial, and many leaders from the province, city, and county will be attending. On one hand, if they know the prosecutor is the murderer's childhood friend, it won't be good for your future. On the other hand, considering your relationship with him, I'm afraid your prosecution might not be strong enough. What do you mean not strong enough? How will Chastin be judged? What else? Of course, immediate execution of the death penalty. Xander Su anxiously said, but he has a brain tumor, he only has a few months left to live, why do this? The chief prosecutor looked at him for a long time and sighed softly. This is not something we can decide at our level. The leaders above have already said to execute immediately, to avoid complications. It's not good if it gets out. What if he appeals? Can it be delayed for a few months? The chief prosecutor shook his head. Impossible, he won't be given the chance to appeal. If he dares to appeal, he'll suffer in the detention center. This will be made clear to him before the trial, and he will definitely weigh the pros and cons. This decision is made by the leaders in the province. Even if the media knows the inside story, no media outlet dares to report it. You should also consider, actually, I think the death penalty is a good thing for him. Dragging it out, his condition will worsen. You know how painful late-stage cancer is. The detention center won't pay for his treatment. Nobody wants him to die in prison, but nobody wants him to continue living either. This is the only choice. What about his lawyer? The city will assign one for him. An assigned lawyer won't help him defend, will they? The chief prosecutor coughed, stared at him, and after a long while, said, I can understand your feelings, but you should know, the outcome of this matter cannot be changed. I advise you not to think too much about it. He has a brain tumor, he should be given a psychiatric evaluation, he doesn't have full criminal responsibility. Didn't we do the same for the mayor's son before? The chief prosecutor shook his head helplessly. You wouldn't think this way normally. This is not a small case. You want to protect him from being sentenced to death, to peacefully spend his remaining months? Impossible. I don't have that power. Forget it. You should rest for a few days. Don't think about this matter. If you still want to do something, I can only help you arrange a meeting with him. Other than that, thinking more is useless. Xander Su finally closed his mouth, silently left the office, picked up the old photos, and couldn't help but let the tears flow again. To protect himself, Chastin had devised the cigar box trick, yet he had always doubted his motives, even suspecting that he wanted to frame him. Although Chase Chen's actions were crazy, from beginning to end, he always remembered his friend, never intending to harm him. Yet, for the crimes he committed, he would be artificially terminated before his natural life ended. Everyone had a good year except for Xander Su. Xander Su didn't go back to his hometown this year. On New Year's Eve, he went to the detention center to see Chase Chen. However, Chase Chen, wanting to show his resentment towards Xander Su, chose not to meet him, which made Xander Su both understand and feel touched. Later, he learned from the detention center staff that many leaders had instructed to closely monitor Chase Chen's health condition and to immediately address any emergencies, ensuring nothing happens to him now. He was kept in a solitary cell, could rest as he pleased, all his reasonable requests were met, and his medication was promptly refilled once it ran out. Director Wang also visited Chase Chen several times, greeting the detention center staff and asking them to take good care of him. Chase Chen himself didn't show any signs of sadness. He spent his days reading and sleeping, as if he wasn't in a detention center. Whenever the staff brought him meals, he would politely thank them and smile, appearing calm. Of course, the detention center staff also told Xander Su something else. Chase Chen had been groaning in pain when going to the bathroom recently, probably due to cancer pain. But when medical staff attended to him, he always said it was nothing, just taking some painkillers. Xander Su sighed. It seemed Chase Chen had done everything he wanted to do, knowing that even if he wasn't executed, he would reach his end in a few months. Perhaps an early execution would be a mercy. Well, that's fine too, old friend. Since you've achieved your goal, I wish you a happy new year too, Xander Su silently thought. But what he didn't know was that Chase Chen's goal had not yet been achieved. He still had one thing he considered most meaningful left undone. When he learned from his appointed lawyer that the trial would be the first Saturday after the new year, he was genuinely happy. Soon, there would be a beautiful end. On the first Saturday after the new year, the Jean County People's Court conducted a closed trial of this case without posting any notice. No one expected the court to work overtime on the weekend, so the secrecy of this trial was well maintained. Although the trial was closed, the audience today was of high caliber, including leaders from the Provincial Political and Legal Committee, the Public Security, Procuratorate, and legal systems, as well as leaders from city and county units, some government officials, and relatives of officials from the Fan family. Xander Su was also in the audience. Not even the People's Congress representatives were invited to attend, aiming to minimize the impact of this case as much as possible. The judge and the prosecutor assigned by the higher authorities had already revised and organized the script according to instructions from above, ensuring that the plot developed as they had envisioned. But could Chase Chen, who had always been acting, come up with something unexpected? At this moment, no one could anticipate what would happen next. Chase Chen was charged with 4 serious crimes, killing 7 people, a massive scale of crime with a thick case file. The prosecutor spent the entire morning and still hadn't finished reading it. Xander Su had no appetite for lunch, knowing that after today, Chase Chen would soon reach the end of his life. However, Chase Chen in the defendant's seat remained emotionally stable, quietly listening to the prosecutor, occasionally showing an indescribable expression on his face. At noon, the court adjourned and continued in the afternoon. It wasn't until after 3 p.m. that the indictment and the presentation of evidence were completed. The judge asked Chase Chen's defense attorney if he had any doubts about the prosecutor's cross-examination, to which the appointed lawyer agreed completely. The judge then asked if the lawyer had anything to rebut, and the lawyer requested the judge and jury to proceed with the sentencing according to laws and regulations. Xander Su cursed silently in his mind, calling them all actors. Just then, Chase Chen, who had barely spoken from the beginning, spoke up, hello to the judge, jury, and all the leaders in the audience. He had a radiant smile, his voice clear and spirited, not at all like someone in the late stages of cancer. Everyone was stunned by his sudden speech, especially seeing his expression, as if he wasn't a defendant but a confident and experienced defense attorney. The court quickly responded, "Defendant, do you wish to make a statement?" Chase Chen smiled. "A few days ago, I read some law books. At this stage, I should be allowed to speak, right?" Yes, I should say, Judge, the defendant requests to speak. Everyone found his unusual behavior strange. Xander Sue's eyes widened, and the judge was somewhat at a loss. According to the law, the defendant's request should be granted, but what did he plan to say? The judge's gaze turned to the leaders of the provincial political and legal committee sitting in the audience. The leaders were also suspicious, unclear what Chastien would say. But considering this was a closed trial, even if he said something inappropriate, it wouldn't get out. If he wanted to defend himself, now with the evidence being conclusive, it was unlikely he could refute it, so they nodded to the judge. The judge said, "The defendant may respond." Chastien shook his head. "No, I'm not responding. I don't want to deny anything. These 4 murder cases were committed by me, and according to the law, I should be sentenced to death. I have no objection to this. I just want to correct a few mistakes in the prosecutor's indictment." He paused, then suddenly smiled at the leaders and audience in the audience. "In fact, these 4 murder cases were not committed by me alone. I had an accomplice, but you didn't catch him." This statement shocked everyone, causing a stir. Greg Wang was particularly shaken, thinking, how could it be an issue with an accomplice again? No one stopped him from continuing, everyone wanted to know what he would say next. The judge was also stunned. Chastien continued, "After the special case team arrested me, they once suspected I had an accomplice. However, eventually, they were deceived by my confession and other evidence, believing I committed the crimes alone, without an accomplice. In fact, I can now say that I had an accomplice." Several leaders' gazes turned to Greg Wang, who looked extremely embarrassed. Then, Chastien seemed to speak in defense of Greg Wang, but this can't be blamed on the friends from the special case team. "I think they were quite professional. It's just that I protected my partner too well. In the prosecutor's materials, there seems to be a missing item. I have a psychological treatment record that notes my homosexual tendencies. Perhaps the prosecution thought this was irrelevant to the case, so they didn't submit it?" Some leaders in the audience began whispering to each other, and more people looked at Greg Wang, whose expression clearly confirmed that this was true. "Actually, I'm not just inclined towards homosexuality, I admit I'm a standard homosexual. Think about it, how could a homosexual fall in love with Jasmine Gone and commit crimes for her?" This statement dropped like a bomb, completely changing the narrative of the defendant's motive for the crime. "Maybe because I was ugly and had low self-esteem in my youth, I didn't dare to interact with girls. At least from the time I discovered this tendency, I was already in college. You can investigate my classmates and ask if I had any contact with female students during college? None. You can also investigate my work environment in the United States and ask if I had a girlfriend over the years? None. Why? Maybe it was because of my appearance during college, but after graduation, I had a job in the United States that many would envy. Why didn't I date? Because I couldn't accept women. So, when I told the special case team that Jasmine Gone was once my brief girlfriend, it was a lie. I felt disgusted even when I made up this lie because I really can't imagine being with a woman, it would make me vomit. If you still don't believe me, you can take off my pants and see if my anal sphincter is somewhat loose. Let's talk about the crime process. I was responsible for planning the entire process and preparing for each crime, but the actual killing was half done by me and half by my friend. The first time I killed Jian Xiaobin, it was indeed by my hand, because my friend was sitting in the car and had no chance to act. The prosecutor's materials said I followed Jian Xiaobin into Anil Road, took the opportunity to inject nicotine into his neck with a tranquilizer gun, then carried him up the residential building next to him and threw the body behind the house through the stairwell window, before driving back to move the body. I also led the special case team to identify the scene, and the prosecutor just provided photos. What's the real situation? It's not like that at all. The truth is, after I killed him, I hid Jiang Xiaobin's body in a corner nearby, covered it with something, and then my friend drove in and moved it. Think about it, for the entire crime process, could I have thought so thoroughly at the time to throw it from the stairwell to the back of the house? What if there were people in that green space? Wouldn't I be taking a greater risk? The safest way, I wouldn't kill Jiang Xiaobin on Anil Road, where both ends have surveillance. Another method, I bought 3 cars, parked them on the 3 possible routes Jiang Xiaobin could take home every day, and because the 3 cars swapped parking spots every day, they wouldn't attract attention. And after killing Jiang Xiaobin, I would move his body the next day or even the 3rd day. How would you investigate the vehicles? This method is much safer than throwing his body behind the house. You should believe that 3 cars wouldn't pose an economic burden to me. The gallery whispered among themselves. Indeed, according to the police investigation, if Chastien had used this method and chosen to move the evidence later the next evening, it would have been flawless, leaving the police without a single clue. However, the method Chastien was accused of using in the prosecutor's indictment was significantly clumsier and riskier. When killing Su Yao and Li Qiming, the guy who later rode the electric scooter into the scene, do you think his build matches mine? The task force had their doubts at the time, but I insisted it was me, suggesting perhaps it was the darkness, the angle of the light, combined with the way I rode and dressed, so you believed it. When it came to killing Vincent Fan and his wife, the guy who scouted the place several times before, I believe you could tell it was me without saying. But what about that morning, the last time? Does this figure look like the person from before? Correct, that was still my friend, not me. If you don't believe me, there's another thing you can investigate. If I remember correctly, the murder of Vincent Fan and his wife happened on December 22nd. Just around that time, due to a chemical experiment in my house leaking toxic substances, I wasn't staying at home but at the Pujian Grand Hotel, room number 806. I remember clearly. Not far from my room, there was a surveillance camera in the corridor, which must have captured me entering my room on the night of December 21st and leaving the room the next day, which was after the crime had been committed. If you check, you'll find I had no opportunity to commit the crime, so I couldn't possibly be the person on the electric scooter. With a bang, Greg Wang's heart was shattered. Chastien had never mentioned this before, and the police would never have thought of this twist. If the hotel surveillance indeed confirms his alibi that he was in his room at the time of the crime, then the person on the electric scooter was undoubtedly his accomplice. Chastien had deceived me and the entire police force. By bringing this up now, was he trying to embarrass the entire task force? Greg Wang clenched his teeth, his body trembling with excitement. Chastien continued, after the police caught me and searched my house, they found a metal barrel containing burned personal items like toothbrushes and towels, which the prosecutor has already mentioned, with photos as evidence. The task force found hair remnants in the barrel and conducted a DNA test. Luckily, the results matched my own, probably because my friend's hair had been completely burned and I had also treated it with dilute sulfuric acid. I believe even if there were skin flakes or other materials left, the police wouldn't be able to trace him. And my friend only stayed at my place for a few days, just sleeping, so I believe you won't find his hair on the floor. He smiled. Do you really think I'm so cold-blooded as to find someone of a similar age and build to kill, making it look like a suicide out of fear of crime? Even if I wanted to do that, I'm well aware that it's not that easy, because no matter how much you clean, you could still find my hair on the floor of the house, and even many of my clothes have it, including the sweat on my shoes, which can also be tested for DNA. Could I really fake it? The people at the scene analyzed his words and deeply agreed. If the perpetrator of such a major case committed suicide out of fear of crime, a DNA test would definitely be conducted. Despite cleaning, it's impossible to completely remove all hair and fiber from the floors. Such a plan would be futile. Fortunately, my friend only stayed at my house for a few days, and I cleaned up everything he used, so you won't be able to trace it anymore. Greg Wang buried his head in his hands, no longer wanting to listen. With each new statement from Chastien, it felt like he was slapped 100 times. He felt ashamed, angry, and had nowhere to vent his fury. And then there was the time I planned to kill Xander Su. Xander Su listened intently. If I really wanted to kill Xander Su, why would I place the TNT-laden cigar in the bottom row? I heard from the task force that he only smoked one because it didn't taste right to him and didn't continue. If the whole box was filled with TNT, wouldn't he have died immediately upon trying one? Why would the top row be real cigars and only the bottom row contain TNT-laden ones? Another slap to Greg Wang's face. How had he not thought of this? If Chase-jin truly wanted to kill Xandersu, why place the cigars in the second row? Speaking of which, you must all be curious about who my accomplice is. Unfortunately, that's a secret I cannot reveal. Because that person is the one I love the most, it's a pity he's not entirely homosexual. He turned to men because he couldn't have Jasmine gone, whom he loved. I know, in his heart, he will always love Jasmine gone the most. But, he is the one I love the most. He was willing to commit crimes for Jasmine gone, and I helped him without hesitation, wholeheartedly, because that's love, perhaps a kind of love that's hard for you to understand. Everyone couldn't help feeling nauseated. The unconditional love between the same sex, choosing to kill for this distorted love, how twisted the thought and emotion must be. In fact, I'm very jealous of Jasmine gone. Jasmine gone is the one who received all his love. If you say I committed crimes and killed for Jasmine gone, you're gravely mistaken. I would be overjoyed if Jasmine gone died. How could I seek revenge for this disgusting woman? I know, in his heart, he truly loves only Jasmine gone. I'm just his temporary solace, a temporary partner, a temporary accomplice. But I couldn't help loving him, helping him, achieving what he wanted to do. I could sacrifice myself. Especially when I found out I had brain cancer and my days were numbered, perhaps the most meaningful thing I could do was to help him seek revenge for Jasmine gone. Another wave of nausea swept over them. The sacrifice for love between different sexes is understandable to the world. But now, it's the distorted love between the same sex, sacrificing oneself for such love and fulfilling another person, which is truly hard to accept. I never really wanted to harm Xandersu, even though we hadn't been in contact for 10 years, but he was still my childhood friend, one of the few friends I had. But my friend was furious at Xandersu for abandoning Jasmine gone in the early years and for not preventing the subsequent tragedy of Jasmine gone after the incident with He Jianqing. He harbored deep resentment. At his strong request, I could only make this box of cigars. But I didn't want Xandersu to get hurt, so I placed the TNT-laden cigars in the second row. What would happen to Xandersu was left to fate. Actually, from the moment I chose to help him seek revenge, I never thought I could die peacefully. Initially, I deliberately appeared on surveillance to mislead the police with my height increased by wearing insoles. On the other hand, I had considered that with so many crimes to follow, there would always be times when I'd be captured on surveillance. The more distinctive my features were, the less noticeable his would be, making it harder for the police to trace him. To protect him, I had to sacrifice myself. After you issued the warrant, I never thought of escaping. That's why I took the biggest risk and went directly to Zhang Honba's company to act. If I really wanted to escape, with a disguise, even in a small county, it would still take you a lot of effort to catch me. This was something the officers involved couldn't deny. The process of arrest was always the most troublesome part of an investigation. Even when Chase-jin passed by the police, he wasn't recognized. If it weren't for him removing his disguise, catching him wouldn't have been so easy. I believe that after doing so much, even after my death, my friend will have me in his heart for the rest of his life. As for why I killed those 7 people, there's no need to elaborate on Zhang Honba and Vincent Fan's family. Without these two, the incident with He Jianqing wouldn't have happened, and Jasmine Gan wouldn't have died. As for River and Li Gang's families, because they repeatedly troubled the He family after Jasmine Gan's incident, even not sparing Jasmine Gan's young child, my friend was furious. He even hated them more than Vincent Fan and Zhang. So, he chose to start with these 2 families first. My friend has a worse temper than me. Although I'm in, my friend is still out there. Those who troubled the He family, be careful,